Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. There's a buzz here today at Pack 14 because we have Anthony Darby with us. Anthony, what is your new business in Salisbury?
Peninsula Alternative Health.
There's a lot of talk about this. Now, what do you guys do over there at Peninsula Alternative Health?
So we are the first medical cannabis dispensary open on Delmarva, and we opened about 30 days ago serving patients, and we are the dispensary or almost the pharmacy outlet where patients would go to obtain medical cannabis in the area.
Okay, so if I have some sort of a condition, I go to my doctor and he writes me a prescription.
Yeah, technically it's called a written recommendation, but that's the idea. Certain doctors all doctors are legally available to write these recommendations, but they do have to actually apply and register with the Maryland Cannabis Commission, and not all doctors have done that. So there are still some limitations in terms of which doctors you can go to, but certainly Maryland has outlawed several qualifying conditions, things like anorexia, nausea, all the way to PTSD. And then they've also put a clause in there that if a physician believes that there's a reasonable expectation that a patient would get a better outcome by using medical cannabis, then they can prescribe it for that. So we see a lot of chronic pain, anxiety, those different types of mental disorders that folks are coming in for as well.
Interesting. And you guys call it cannabis, not marijuana, because the marijuana plant is a very complicated plant.
Right. So cannabis was always, or marijuana was always known as cannabis up until kind of the Reefer Madness era. So Eli Lilly,
which is one of my favorite movies. I really enjoy
and other pharmaceutical companies were selling cannabis tinctures and cannabis products. As part of a socioeconomic fear, they started calling it marijuana, which was the Mexican name, which is why sometimes you see it with an H instead of a J. So the plant is known as cannabis, and we're trying to educate folks that it should be called cannabis, that marijuana is more of a slang term that was derogatory to the plant.
Right, and it's not the classic marijuana, I guess, that people use. It's a medicinal thing, so it has a whole different reaction or something.
Yeah. So cannabis plants, I mean, they're naturally occurring, and people have been using them for years and years. I think the biggest difference that people are surprised about Maryland's program is because it's a medical program, the testing on the types of plants and strains that we have, and the ability to which we are able to match strains, cannabinoids, and terpenes, which are parts of the plant, to disease states and symptoms, is really done in a scientific manner, not so much of I'm sick, or maybe someone knows someone that went through chemotherapy, so their family member got them cannabis and said, here's a bag of cannabis, try this.
Right.
We're using a much more scientific approach in treating our patients than that type of a philosophy.
Right. And you're located in the old Dr. Johnson's old veterinary hospital. That people know
so
where that
we're right
is.
across from Backstreet Grill,
Yeah.
right next to Johnson McKee Animal Hospital. I think it was also Salisbury Housing, Salisbury Neighborhood Housing at one time. We're really happy to be in that location. We're just over a mile from the hospital and right downtown, easily accessible for our patients. So we're really excited to be in that location, and our neighbors have been very welcoming to us.
So when you go in, does it feel like a pharmacy, or?
It's almost like a combination of a pharmacy and a doctor's office. So when you first walk in, there's a security measure that we have in place so that when you first walk in, you see Ryan Holland, who's our director of security, and he greets all of our patients, and he actually makes sure that they are in the state's database and that they are legally able to obtain medical cannabis from us. Once he checks that box, then he buzzes them through. Then it gets a lot more similar. Then it almost goes into like a physician waiting room. And then when you walk back, then it turns into kind of the pharmacy. So there's a measure for security, and then a quick brief wait, and then you're buzzed back. When you're buzzed back, you have a chaperone or patient consultant with you at all times. Our patient consultants are highly trained. Dr. Hoffman has trained all of our patient consultants. They all pass a competency course demonstrating a high level of competency in applying medical cannabis as a medicine. And our patients can expect when they walk through that they don't need to have all the answers, that when they walk in, they can have an open conversation with us and we'll be able to educate them on the strains, the plants, and kind of the method of administration that would be best suited for their condition.
Right. Do the doctors make a determination about what kind of plant it is? Or, I mean, are there a whole different variety of cannabis?
You know, to be completely honest, there's a lot of weight and a lot of that responsibility is actually left to us. So the physicians are almost, in some cases, just saying, cannabis is an applicable medicine for you, and I approve you to be able to get this amount. But that's it. You know, it's up to us to be able to take that patient, consult with them, determine a method of administration. Is this someone that's going to smoke flower? Like most people, we call it flower, is what most people would refer to as cannabis that they're familiar with. But now we also have oil cartridges, which are vape pens, and we also have tablets, and we have drinks, and we have topical balms. So we have lots of different methods of administration, and how someone uses that administration method is going to determine the effect. So if someone has migraines, which cannabis is very effective in treating migraines, the first way that we would probably suggest them treating migraines is through a topical balm that they would rub on their temple. There's no psychoactive effect. They don't get high. They don't even get any other sensation other than relief of pain in their migraine going away. Some of the other products that we have will have a much higher likelihood of a psychoactive effect, and I guess require a little bit more due diligence in how you would administer them. But I think people are often surprised when they walk through our facility and find out that we have CBD oils and we have these other non-psychoactive medicines that are very applicable for a lot of conditions.
Interesting. Now, as a patient, do I have to register somewhere before I do this? Or?
Yeah, so the first step as a patient is you go to mmcc.maryland.gov, which is the state's Cannabis Commission's website. They've actually cleaned it up a lot recently, so it's fairly easy to follow the steps. But your very first step is basically registering on that website, and what they're checking for is your identity to make sure you are who you are. Once you're in that database, then you go see a physician. The physician will then basically sign your recommendation number, make you a live active patient, and then you would come to a dispensary like ours.
Interesting. I was reading about this in advance, 'cause I don't know a lot about it, but there's still so much research to be done on cannabis.
A huge hurdle in our industry is research and development because it's still a Schedule I drug. So just to clarify, other Schedule I drugs are like heroin and cocaine, where you have Schedule II drug. Even cocaine is a Schedule II drug. Methamphetamines are Schedule II. So these are drugs that they say have a higher medicinal value than something Schedule I like cannabis. Because of that, universities that often get their research dollars from pharmaceutical companies have kind of taken a step back and say, this is a lot of risk for us. I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze, the risk is worth the reward.
Right.
Also, folks like NIH have the same competing pharmaceutical interests. So there's a lot of suppression and obstacles and hurdles that folks face in getting more research and development out there. There have been more journals and more scientific data in the last 5 years, and I think probably the last 50, which is really cool and important. The JAMA, which is the Journal for American Medical Association, they just released a 20-year study where it was all retroactive, but they went back the last 20 years, looked at a review of studies and articles, and compiled almost a checklist of this cannabis definitively is appropriate for these conditions. It may be appropriate for these conditions, and there's no evidence yet that says it's appropriate for these conditions. So it's not an exhaustive study, but it's starting to give physicians who were desperately looking for research some information. It's a huge obstacle, and I try to be sympathetic to the physicians out there. The way that cannabis is being presented to physicians is completely contradictory to how everything has been presented to them before. Typically, it's a pharmaceutical sales rep that says,
Right.
We have 30,000 case studies and clinical trials and data, and everything says that this is safe, use it. We're coming to them saying, here's all the anecdotal studies and some research and some trials, and by the way, the government is kind of throwing this into your laps, right? There's no required education for physicians. There's not even a lot of resources for physicians. So there's definitely a lot of growing pains with an industry like this, and it's something that I hope gets ironed out in the future so that patients and physicians are able to have a much better and productive conversation about medical cannabis as being appropriate for a lot of conditions.
Right. So I guess there's probably anecdotal follow-up. People let their doctor know how how it reacted, how it worked, that kind of thing.
Yes, doctors and then us as well. So almost every patient that leaves our facility gets a dosing journal. What we ask them is they track their usage. They track what method of administration, their pain level or their symptom from a scale of 1 to 10 before. And then simply 20 minutes or 30 minutes after the onset, journalize that as well. So document, did your pain go down? Was it a 10 before and now it's a 4? How much did you use? Is it effective? Cannabis has a biphasic effect. And what that means is that there's a sweet spot. If you use too little, you won't get the desired results, and if you use too much, you won't get the desired results. So there's certainly a higher onus on patients that are using cannabis to be diligent and track it themselves and provide the feedback to us. If I have hypertension, high blood pressure, I go in, my doctor says I don't know the numbers, but you're XYZ over XYZ.
Right.
Here's a pill, come back in 60 days, we're going to take a blood test and see if that's gone down. Well, if I'm measuring pain, there's no test. There's no magic pill where I say, okay, take this and come back and we're going to measure your pain. So there's a higher level of onus on patients, just like physicians with medical cannabis, because of the way it's being outlaid.
Right. I asked somebody why the pharmaceutical companies don't get involved in this, and they kind of came back to me that they're able to charge more for the medicines that they make as opposed to cannabis, which is much cheaper to produce. Is that really what's going on, or?
It's a multi-pronged situation, but truthfully, one of the biggest things that and reasons why folks come to us is because of the lack of side effects. So
But I love the side effects in all those commercials. I really enjoy.
Right, I mean, so exactly. So fibromyalgia, right?
Yeah.
This is a disease that is relatively recent. It's not something we talked about 100 years ago. We know that it affects nerves. We know that it causes people a lot of pain, a lot of uncomfortableness. When we give something like Lyrica, to your point, you listen to a Lyrica commercial,
Right.
side effects may cause you to be miserable.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're treating this, but now there's always side effects, and what do we commonly do in polypharmacy? Well, let's treat the side effects with more drugs. So, it's funny, folks have different opinions on medical cannabis for sure. But the one thing that I almost get complete consensus on is this idea that I'm tired of pills. Like, I don't want to take 6 pills. I don't want to take 2 pills to help me and then take 4 pills to offset what the 2 pills are doing to me.
Right.
And the stories that we hear from our patients, we've been open for 30 days. We have folks that were going from 8 very, very strong pain pills a day, 4 times a day, 2 pills a day, to never using a pain pill for the last 14 days, only using cannabis, not having stomach problems, not having, a lot of the side effects from even like the opiates, the stomach problems.
Sure.
The quality of life for these patients, they don't want to be on them. Some of them are physically addicted to them. So they tell us, I hate these, but I need something.
Right.
Even if they get off of the opiate itself, they still have this pain issue, which isn't being treated. So, I think overwhelmingly, if there's an area that I would go head to head and feel I could debate anyone on, it's the appropriateness of medical cannabis for long-term chronic pain. If I'm in a car accident or I have a surgery and I'm in my pain level is a 12 out of 10, I think sometimes opiates are very appropriate for a 48, 72-hour regimen, maybe even 7 days max. But to give someone a 90-day supply of an opiate where you know that their tolerance is going to build up, their dependence on it's going to build up, the side effects are going to become detrimental to their quality of life. Cannabis doesn't do that. Our body has an endocannabinoid system. No one talks about it. We have respiratory systems, nerve systems. And the main responsibility of the endocannabinoid system is to create homeostasis within the body. So we have these things that are naturally occurring, these cannabinoids naturally occurring in our body, and cannabis is a great complement to that to help balance that system. To be able to have a plant do that without the long-term side effects on a long-term basis is really, for some folks, life-changing in terms of their quality of life. And I think to limit folks, their ability and access to that, or to have this conception that people just want to get high. It's almost the opposite. People they're getting high off their pain pills. They want to not be high is what they want.
Right. And with the problem with the opioids, the addiction, the same kind of addiction doesn't exist for the cannabis, does it?
No, so we have an endocannabinoid system. We have receptors all over our body. One of the fun facts about cannabis, there's one place in your body, almost only one place where there's no receptors, and it's the medulla oblongata, which is important because that controls respiratory functions. So why can't you overdose on cannabis? Because your brain will never tell your body to stop breathing, and that's what happens when you overdose on an opiate or even alcohol, is that eventually your brain stops sending signals for your respiratory system, and your respiratory system stops functioning.
I never knew that.
And a lot of the side effects that people that do have can be cured with dosing. So they use a little less, or they use a higher CBD or lower THC levels. We can tweak that to give people a pretty pleasant experience.
Now, your medical director, Mary Pat Hoffman's got some real credentials.
Yeah, she's really our rock star and really the linchpin to our business. She is a PharmD, a doctor of pharmacy, and been studying medical cannabis for almost 10 years. A very compelling story. She was at Happy Harry's as a pharmacist and had a
Now we know why Harry's so happy.
yeah, exactly, right. And had a little old lady who was knitting hats for the nurseries and hospitals, and had a fairly productive quality of life for being in her late 70s, and then got cancer and started chemotherapy, and all of a sudden she didn't see this patient anymore, who was in her, she would come in, I guess, to the store almost every day just to be busy, and she didn't see her for a few weeks. Saw her son, found out that the chemotherapy was wearing her down, no quality of life. And her son says, Mary Pat, I'd like for my mom to try some pot. What do you think? She won't do it unless you give her your approval. She said, well, I don't know a lot about this. And this was 10 years ago without the research and a lot of, the internet being the way that it was.
Right.
But she said, let me do some research. I'm fairly confident that it won't harm her. Like it won't kill her for sure.
Right.
And I don't think that it'll be detrimental harm. Did some research, came back with really not much more information than that. Look, everything I've found says that there's likelihood this will help her, but I can't guarantee it. But I can guarantee it's not going to kill her. And if she's this miserable, then I would try it.
Right. I would think there might even be a placebo effect where people think it's going to help them.
But what we find out is that it's not. That there's actually there's medical value. So fast forward about a month later, little lady's back in the store. You changed my life by recommending this to me. I have my appetite back now that I'm eating and I'm sleeping again. Like, these things are all so interconnected. I think the more we learn about mental health and we start focusing on things like that, how important is eating and sleeping? Well, some of the biggest benefits cannabis can help you do is eat and sleep. So when these folks have stomach issues and are constantly losing weight and they can't find a way to get their appetite back, we can give their appetite back, and then their energy levels go up, and then they're able to have a quality of life. Or a PTSD victim who has nightmares every night. We give them a night of sleep without a nightmare, and they actually wake up rested. I mean, that piece of 8 hours affects their next 14, 12 hours in a way that it's tough to describe. When you read some of the comments on our Facebook page, some of the reviews from our patients, it's amazing. I mean, we got into this to help patients, and we're really making an impact, and we're really changing people's lives for the better in a way that, sometimes I wish it was being documented, because I think if the public saw the reality of what happens in our dispensary, their minds would be blown. 64% of our patients are over 45 years old. Like, I think that's a stat that,
right,
when it comes off the tongue, is like, oh, well. But this concept that it's just a bunch of college kids, or it's younger people that are just coming in looking to get stoned or get messed up, it's not the case. It's older people that are kind of tired of traditional pharmaceutical outlets and are really looking for anything. And maybe there is some placebo effect in terms of the fact that it's not placebo, but if I'm stressed out because I feel so bad, and I'm able to get some kind of mental relief, a mental holiday from my pain and my anxiety of my condition, then yeah, that does have we believe that outlays to a physical improvement of the quality of life as well. And that if someone is mentally stronger, then they'll be physically stronger in improving their condition.
Right. Now, you guys just opened, and I was reading there was a shortage of cannabis?
Yeah. So two things on that. I think that without try and give ourselves too big of a pat on the back. The way that we opened our doors was much different than others. There were some folks that just swung the doors open, 10-hour waits of patients waiting in long lines,
Right.
and then running out of supply for those patients. So we rationed our supplies from day one, and we also did a pre-registration list. Last week was the first time that we actually did run out of flour for about a day and a half. But relatively speaking, we still had other cannabis-infused products as well. So relatively speaking, our dispensary has done a better job, I think, than most in keeping supply in for our patients through a rationing system. But yeah, there's only about 4 out of the 15 growers right now putting product out to the market as they're still evolving and ramping up their process. So there are supplies shortages throughout the state, and it's also causing pricing increases as well. So right now, our pricing is way higher than we would have expected in our purchasing, and then it's also higher for what our patients are paying as well.
Yeah, being a news guy, I feel like I pay attention to this stuff, and I know there was discussion about it in the General Assembly. And then all of a sudden, there's a plan for 15 different locations for it to be grown. There was the Natalie LaPrade committee or whatever it was. And so a lot of work had been going on for a long time that I didn't know about.
So
But
we filled our application out over 3 years ago,
yeah,
and really have just been working in the trenches. Dr. Hoffman and I had the privilege of leaving our jobs thinking that this would be a 12-month kind of turnaround from application to fruition of the dispensary. And it was closer to 3 years. So we've been dying for this opportunity to finally open our doors and serve patients. But this isn't something that, we just spur of the moment. To your point, a lot of people say, oh, well, I want to do that, or how'd you get into that? And the truth is, we started 3 years ago, and we were very involved in the legislative process. And the community and stuff has been very, community and the leadership out there have been very embracing of us. And I think part of the reason is because we went to them 3 years ago, called Chief Duncan up on the phone 3 years ago and said, this is our intentions. Jake Day and Mayor Ireton at the time, because Ireton was still in office when we filled our application, but was towards the end of his last term. And I think that because they were familiar and they know this has been going on for so long, that for those folks that were kind of in the know, this wasn't a huge surprise. Where for even people that follow the media, they were still like, wow. I have friends that are still amazed that it's legal in Maryland, and they're still kind of learning. There's so much ambiguity around the program because, maybe to your point, the layout was so much different than expected.
right.
It was almost a 12-month delay, and there are some shortages, and there's so much misinformation out there. It's almost impossible to try to be the beacon of truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people are so interested in the topic and rumors fly, we see a lot of mistruths out there.
Yeah. So do you guys have to buy the marijuana that's grown in Maryland?
Yes.
Okay.
So kind of a fun fact or a truth for any state cannabis program is the only way that they operate under the federal guidelines is by being state specific. So everything that we do is 100% within the guidelines of Maryland. At no point in time could we transport any product outside state lines, or could we accept product from outside state lines. 15 growers in Maryland. There's also 15 processors. These are the folks that are making the oils and tinctures and tablets from the actual plant. And then there was over 100 dispensaries that are approved, but I think the reality is that there's probably going to be less than 60 that actually open in this first onslaught, and then the commission will have some tough questions to answer in terms of how they go about reissuing the last 40 licenses. For a variety of reasons, a lot of dispensaries are not going to make it to the finish line.
There's some controversy here locally. Some of the people that wanted to grow it didn't get the contract. Where is it grown around here?
The closest is probably our friends at Shore Natural RX. They're in Shaw or Bishopville area. Okay. They're putting out really amazing product. I'm really thrilled that honestly the best product right now, or some of the best product right now in the state, is coming right from the Eastern Shore. So we're really happy to be focusing their product. There's another facility that is not operational yet, but will be across from the police headquarters in Cambridge, Maryland. I think some folks are familiar with that. That's a growing and a processing facility. There's a processing facility in Centerville, Chestertown area. Chesapeake Alternatives, we feature their products in our dispensary. And Matt Blair Wellness is another processor, and he's in the Bishopville area. So there's about a handful of us on the lower to mid-eastern shore, and then a couple more on the upper shore and towards the Queen Anne's area.
It's all grown indoors?
Yeah, some growers have indoor, and then they also have an outdoor greenhouse, still
Right.
somewhat indoor, but kind of not very. So, but the majority of it is grown indoors. I can tell you that we've gone out and toured a couple of the different facilities. They're all tremendously different, based upon expertise and kind of just strategy. So we've seen some that are in the middle of nowhere, like the Deliverance movie, and then all of
Right.
a sudden you see greenhouses pop up, and like literally, you go down a dirt road for over a mile. There's nothing there in the woods, and then all of a sudden these greenhouses pop up. We've seen other ones where they're across the street from a Navy Federal Credit Union and Chick-fil-A
Right.
with dummy windows, and it looks like a regular office building, and then you go in and see it's all concreted behind it, and it's all facade. So, it's been it's kind of cool to see, the different places. But I can tell you that the technology that's being utilized by these growers is very significant and very high tech. The testing in Maryland is second to none. So it's been a burden for us. Part of the supply issues have been because Maryland's testing requirements are so stringent and the growers had to acclimate. They have been growing cannabis in Colorado under a certain set of regulations. Now they come to Maryland and all of a sudden their cannabis is testing for things that Maryland had put in. For instance, chromium. Sounds scary, but it's a natural occurring element. It's in water. It's in a lot of different things. Most states don't even test for it. The the next highest threshold state would be like Pennsylvania. It's 10 times. So Maryland's threshold for chromium is 10 times higher than everybody else's. You know what I mean? So the good news for patients is that the products that they're getting, the detailed packaging that we have has the terpenes, the cannabinoids, the percentages, mold-free, pesticide-free. They know that they're getting the best product in the country. So it's really important for us to, if we're going to be medical and we're going to have this concept, that we know that we're not just giving them below what we believe medical grade cannabis. The cannabis that we're putting out there, although it's expensive, is valuable to the patients because it's so top notch.
In terms of a business model, as marijuana becomes more prevalent, more states make it legal, is that going to affect your business at the end if people can sort of self-medicate?
Um, I don't. I think that honestly, right now, the biggest value that we're giving to patients is the knowledge and the education. These folks, a lot of them have access to cannabis on the street today,
Right.
and it's not the same quality, but in some ways, it's similar, right? There's differences, and our patients are paying for the independent lab testing, and they know that is what it is. But the idea that what they can get for the street sometimes versus what they can pay in our dispensaries, we're marginally higher. So it's the value that we give them, and being able to put them in the right direction and actually give them the knowledge is where we're building value. And even when states ramp up, there's still that huge knowledge gap. There's still that. So I think ideally, honestly, as other states ramp up, we'll be starting to play a larger role in the regional presence. Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, all are making some progressions towards programs. We have interest in playing in those states as well. Also, we have a very high interest in either through acquisition or through additional licensing, getting more dispensaries within the state of Maryland.
Interesting. Got an open house coming up. Tell me about that. When is that?
We're really excited. This is our very first community event where we've kind of opened our doors to the public, not so much at our facility, but to our leadership team and to kind of what we're doing. So we have a full day of events planned. It starts at noon at the Wicomico Civic Youth and Civic Center. We have an event planned. I'll be doing about an hour presentation on medical cannabis in Maryland.
This
Really,
is the 19th.
this is January 19th from 12 to 5.
What day of the week is that?
Oh, sorry, it's a Friday.
Friday, okay.
Yep, Friday, January 19th. So we'll start off at the Civic Center. I'll kind of do an overview of Maryland's program. We have a Facebook Live event being moderated by Julian from WMDT News 47. So folks can send their questions in via Facebook, and we'll answer them right live through that portion of the segment. And then I do a presentation from basically 1 to 2, and then we have a kind of a meet and greet with all of our partners. This is kind of a unique situation because our leadership team is spread out. So we have 4 partners: myself, Dr. Hoffman, Chuck Henn, who's our COO, and Dan Corpon is our Chief Technology Officer. They live on the other side of the bridge. So all 4 of us will be together on stage at the same time, kind of answering questions and giving some behind the scenes anecdotal stories about how this came about. Through the past 3 years, there's no shortage of quirky things that have had to
Right.
happen, nuancy things that have gotten us from A to B. It's been an amazing journey, and just to be able to share some of those details with everyone, I think will be exciting for folks to hear. We'll reconvene after the Youth and Civic Center back to our facility. We'll do a ribbon cutting out front, and then because of the uniqueness of our business, we can't have everybody in-house, like a traditional open house. So we'll just walk across the street to Back Street and just kind of have a celebration of opening our doors and celebrating being open to the public and serving patients.
He's Anthony Darby. He's the CEO of the new business in town, Peninsula Alternative Health. Great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Greg. I really appreciate it.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on Pack 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.